Thank you. For the Trump administration, it's been a whirlwind week with two huge foreign affairs stories dominating the week.
Yeah, from the contentious G7 meeting over the weekend to last night's historic summit with Kim Jong-un. Joining us from his LA studios is the editor-in-chief of the Daily Wire, political commentator Ben Shapiro. Good morning, Ben. How are you?
Doing okay. How are you?
Okay, so let's start off with this. Trump has said, in this summit, he's ready to start a new history. They called the talks honest, direct, and productive. But you're a little skeptical of the summit. Why?
I'm deeply skeptical of the summit because nothing was actually achieved. Now, normally, if you're going to have the president of the United States, the leader of the free world, meet with a tin pot dictator who keeps 25 million people in a giant slave state and 200,000 people in gulags, you'd assume that at least we get some sort of policy win out of it before he actually sits down with the guy. It is a privilege to sit with the president of the United States. It is a privilege to have your flag flown alongside the flag of the United States. I think that to really understand how bad this is, you have to imagine that the flags that North Korea was flying next to the American flags, those were swastikas, because this is a Nazi slave state. And the juxtaposition, unless you're going to get some sort of real policy consideration out of it, it's a win for Kim Jong-un, and I don't see how it could be anything otherwise. Now, with that said, it's quite possible that all of this ends well, right? It's quite possible that President Trump has negotiated something that's great with Kim Jong-un, but that's not evident from what we see in front of us right now. The deal they actually signed is a very weak deal. It's actually a weaker deal than the deal that was signed in 2005, and we have decades of North Korea lying about its intent to denuclearize. So before everybody jumps over the moon and celebrates, I think it's worthwhile noting that Kim Jong-un and his family are liars, they are dictators, they are murderers, they are genocidal against their own people, and treating this as some sort of great win because we sat down with a country that, frankly, is being run by a bunch of thugs, I fail to see how that's a huge win.
But is there value, though, in the fact that they do have nuclear weapons and there was all this talk between the two sides, fire and fury? Is there value that we're maybe now talking to each other and diplomacy is happening and there's less of a threat of nuclear war?
So I'm happy with low-level diplomacy, but having the president of the United States travel over to Singapore and have high-level talks with the head of a nuclear-armed terrorist state, it grants an enormous amount of legitimacy to Kim Jong-un. I mean, Kim Jong-un was treated as a celebrity there. The president of the United States has now put out a video on his Twitter account that shows him basically celebrating having met with this guy. I don't see why that's anything useful. Again, I'm happy to have them sit together and sign a big agreement that actually has verifiable denuclearization, but 8 times between 1992 and now, the North Korean regime has promised to denuclearize in writing, and never has that actually materialized.
You've been a big critic of the Iran deal, as have many other conservatives. You're actually a critic of both of these things, but so many conservatives who said that the Iran deal wasn't verifiable enough are celebrating President Trump this morning. Why do you think that is?
Because I think that we live in highly partisan times. I think a bunch of people who are praising President Trump over the Iran deal likewise are criticizing President Trump over the North Korean meet, in which he's giving up far less than President Obama gave up to Iran. So it demonstrates the partisanship when all the people who bashed Obama are now praising Trump for doing something very similar, and all the people who were bashing President Obama, all the people who are bashing President Trump right now were praising President Obama for doing something even worse. So if you're going to be intellectually honest about this, you sort of have to play the game of putting the shoe on the other foot. If President Obama had done this in North Korea, would the right be happy or would the right be pretty upset? It's pretty obvious the right would be pretty upset. And if President Obama had done this in North Korea, would the left be pretty happy or would they be pretty upset? The answer is they would have been pretty happy.
But isn't it a start? Don't you have to start somewhere, Ben?
Yes, you start with low-level negotiations with your diplomats. You don't start with a top-line meeting
Pompeo
between the president of the United States and a tin pot
to start a low-level kind of negotiations. Didn't he go over there earlier to start this and set the stage? And now we've gone there, and now they're going to keep continuing the talks afterwards?
Well, then continue the talks up to the point where you actually have something to sign. You don't run around meeting with the worst people on earth and praising them to the skies as President Trump did unless you actually have something material to sign. You don't go there and then sign a deal to say that maybe Kim will come to the United States and they'll go golfing together. Like he has promised nothing of material value. And President Trump has promised essentially that he's going to stop joint military exercises with South Korea, at least for the foreseeable future. Again, maybe this all ends great, but there's only 2 ways this ends. It either ends as a triumph for President Trump, North Korea denuclearizes, and this was the first step toward that, or it ends as a debacle. There really is not much of an in-between.
So the president likes a good show, right? He has a reality show background. We saw Kim Jong-un also likes a good show based off what he does in his country. We saw Dennis Rodman there. We saw the recent emergence of Kim Kardashian at the Oval Office. Do you think that this is a reality show presidency?
I think it is, but I think that the Obama presidency was also reality show presidency. I think we just live in the era of reality shows. And President Trump, in this respect, is not very much different from President Obama, who routinely met with celebrities and who liked these sort of high-profile visits. You remember when he went to Cuba and was hanging out at a baseball game with the Cuban dictators. So, again, I'm disquieted by this, by the way that we treat politics generally. You know, these are serious issues, and they're being treated as fodder for political entertainment on both sides of the aisle and have been for years.
All right. Well, Ben Shapiro, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your view. We appreciate it. And even if you disagree with Ben, he's got a lot to say on Twitter. If you want to follow him, his handle is @Ben Shapiro. You can check out his daily podcast as well. And coming up at 8:20, we're going to get a very different view from Anna Kasparian from the Young Turks. So two of the biggest stars online in politics from different perspectives are both joining us this morning.